don't know that there is that future looming ahead of us. A lot of people seem to think that it is. But all the people who think that it is, who ask me that question, I always ask this question, well, what are you going to do about it? Because clearly we're not going to stop people from copying books. I mean, behold the typist, right? So anybody who wants to get a book without paying for it will be able to. At best, you know, we're kind of stuck in this, with trying to envision a marketplace that's based more on a social contract than on exclusion, right? Where people buy it because they feel it's the right thing to do, not because they don't have any choice. And I figure that whatever that ends up being, and it'll probably come along, it'll probably be really weird and inconceivable based on today's thinking, in the same way that, you know, oat bag thinking doesn't take you into the 3D printing future. Whatever that is, being at the coalface, being the guy whose works are being widely distributed electronically and whose audience are acting like a giant distributed antenna for interesting and cool things you can do with electronic text, is better than being the guy sitting in front of his computer with his arms folded going, no electronic books for you until you agree to revise the laws of physics so that things can't be copied once they're on a computer, right? And so that's my answer, right? Be at the coalface, develop what the Germans call Fingerspitzengefühl, which means the ability to kind of sense changes with your fingertips just before they happen, and learn which way to jump when the future changes in a way that's weird.
Let's open up to the audience for questions.
I'm a commercial photographer.
Yeah.
And a lot of my colleagues in the industry rely on copyright and licensing as kind of their main source of income. I don't actually follow in line with them, and I don't feel that this is going to be a viable source of income as more and more digital things take over in the commercial photography field. But I'm curious what you would envision would replace that as kind of the main source of income.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not opposed to copyright. I think that having a system of industrial regulation to regulate the entertainment industry and its various offshoots like stock photography and so on makes sense, in the same way that having a set of rules to regulate, like, you know, banks makes sense. I just think that you shouldn't have to comply with financial regulations to loan your friend $5 for lunch, and you shouldn't have to comply with industrial copying regulations in order to make a Harry Potter fan site. It just doesn't make any sense. You know, the Warner lawyer, when he gets a phone call from the Universal lawyer saying, I'm going to build a Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios, what's my licensing terms, knows how to deal with that, but he doesn't want to hear from the 12-year-old who wants to build a Harry Potter fan site. So I'm actually not opposed to it, but I think its contours also need to reflect realpolitik. And the realpolitik of stock photography appears to be that some of the markets for stock photography are eroded by the inability to stop copying. And there is no practical solution to that I know of. And you know, one of the things that technology does is erodes markets. And it also changes what kind of creators can find work and can earn a living. You know, back in the vaudeville days, the advent of radio and the phonogram really changed things, right? Back in the vaudeville days, the thing that predicted your success is how charismatic you were, not necessarily what a virtuoso you were. And so you could stand on stage and you could do a great show and people would pay to come back and see you. Whereas if you were really great at playing your instrument, but you just stood there with your eyes closed, terrified by the sight of the audience in front of you, no one would want to see you. But when the radio and the phonogram came along, there was a totally different kind of artist who got rewarded. And the performer said, well, what do you mean you expect me to go back into a room and produce work that you're going to take out to my audience? You know, I'm not a clerk. I'm a performer. I do something as old and as holy as that first story told in front of the first fire. You have no business telling me how to earn a living. And you know, 70 years later, the descendants of the recording artists who thrived when the charismatics went under, you tell them, well, you know, there's more money in concerts than there ever been. And they say, well, what do you mean I have to go and tour and perform? I'm not a trained monkey. I'm a white-collar worker. I labor indoors. And when I'm done with my work, I slide it under the door so that some bourgeois man of commerce can take it out to the audience. It sullies my hands to meet with people. You have no business telling me how to make a living. Technology giveth and technology taketh away. You know, one of the things that's happened is that the market, so it's paradoxical. The market for stock art on the one hand has exploded because the number of people who put up websites has exploded. The number of people who produce designed materials in which photos would be good has exploded. The number of blogs has exploded. On the other hand, the ability to enforce licensing terms and to restrict access to works that once they're shared has really decreased. So how do we solve this? Well, I can think of like 9 ways of solving it. I don't know the best way of doing it. You know, one is to say, you know what? I'm like really interested in the big fish. There's thanks to media consolidation and the FCC being asleep at the switch for the last 10 years, there's only like 5 companies that ever actually pay big money for licensing, and I'm just going to watch them. They've got deep pockets. There's lots of contingency lawyers, and I'm just going to sue them into a smoking hole if they don't pay to license my photos and not worry about anyone else. That's one strategy. You know how I learned to stop worrying and love the internet. The other strategies that might work, go and form a stock agency. Get 100 friends together and offer licensing terms that are so cheap that WordPress is willing to buy a license for all of its bloggers, and get a little and divide the money up based on how the photos are used, because WordPress could track that pretty accurately, and if you have the right nice packaged up set of license terms, that might work too. And then the other one is that maybe this is something like wedding photography, where wedding photography used to be de rigueur, and now it's really a nice to have. There's lots of people who know enough great photographers that they choose to do something else. And maybe there's a certain kind of stock photography that, just like travel agents find themselves by and large without an industry, except for a tiny corner of what it used to be, maybe there's a certain kind of stock photography that doesn't thrive anymore in the 21st century. And the stock photography that is thriving, that was thriving 15 years ago, is only like 70 years old, right? Or 50 years old, or 30 years old. It wasn't ever written in the Constitution, thou shalt make stock photography in this way forever, until the end of thine days and the days of thine children, right? I mean, it may just be that was like an accidental business model that occurred in the blip between when photos were desirable and when photos were easy. And that, maybe there was just that kind of lag in the technology, and it was great while it was there, but it's not there anymore. I don't know which of those answers is the right one, but I'm the one thing that I'm totally positive of is that you can't succeed by like suing people, and you're not going to succeed by lobbying to make computers worse or make digital cameras sucky or whatever, right? I mean, all of those things aren't, not that I'm suggesting you would, but generally the kind of response from a lot of rights holders is that. And I always think of it like there's a great Woody Guthrie song where he's talking about how he's going to go and fight the fascists in Europe. And he says, people keep asking me why I'm going to go fight the fascists in Europe, even though I'm so opposed to the current American government. And he said, it's like Joe Louis said when they asked him that question. He answered, well, there's plenty wrong with the world, but Hitler won't help, right? There's plenty wrong with your life, but embarking on a quixotic venture to break the internet isn't going to solve any of those problems, right? At worst, it'll be just kind of an adventure that absorbs an enormous amount of your energy and time and resource that doesn't end up giving you a stable industry when you're done.